So good morning and welcome to the second episode of Series 2. And today I'm absolutely delighted to be in a slightly different venue. We are in the Gusbourne estate, Gusbourne Winery. And I've probably got the perfect person to be a guest on Grapes and Greens. And it's Jonathan White, the Chief Executive of Gusbourne. Jonathan, good morning.
Good morning.
I think you're the perfect person because when I looked through your LinkedIn profile, you've worked at Golf Breaks, and then you worked at Berry Brothers, and then you've now taken over and running Gusbourne. I mean, perfect for us. Just absolutely perfect.
It's a good fit, isn't it? Although I have to say, my as you experienced a week or so ago, my wine experience is maybe a little bit more up to scratch than my golf.
I don't know, the golf
the
was definitely there. It was definitely there. It was a lovely day at Hankley Common, wasn't it?
Absolutely beautiful.
Very nice of Martin Norris to invite us to play, and we just got lucky with the weather. We just in and out the showers.
We did.
The back nine was just perfect. So
it really was, and I just the views from that golf course, the tall trees, the colours of the heathland. It was spectacular, wasn't it? Which was great.
It's a great way to get to know guests. To sort of in a rather than over a meal or whatever, you've got 4 hours to kind of talk about things and get to know you. So hopefully we'll come up with some good questions. But the other thing I have to announce, which we're absolutely delighted about, is that Gusbourne will become our wine partner, our official wine partner of Grapes and Greens. So thank you very much, Jonathan, for that. It's brilliant. We're super excited. The range of wines that obviously we'll go through the podcast, but to have a name that we're familiar with because of our partnership at Wine and Earth with Mashi, I just think it's a really perfect fit for us. So thank you very much.
Yeah, pleasure. Well, we're looking forward to working with you further, for sure.
Perfect. Well, cheers.
Cheers.
On that note. So what have we got here, Jonathan? It's a Blanc de Blanc, 2019.
Yes.
Which I believe is a pretty good year.
Yes. So for us, one of the sort of second or third year of sort of full maturity, if you like, of age of vines across the entire estate. Blanc de Blanc, so 100% Chardonnay, all fruit that we've grown here ourselves in our Gusbourne vineyards, and we think a wine which really typifies English wine, but Gusbourne wines in particular. So there's that kind of lovely acidity that you get with English sparkling wines, that kind of moorish, mouth-watering acidity. Yeah. But then that access to fruit as well, which is where the balance comes through, and a real concentration of flavour. I just love the nose of this wine in particular, and just feel like there's a real impetus there, and minerality. And
we're sat just obviously outside the winery, but where would the grapes be? It's sort of. How many hectares have you got here? It's beautiful. I can see vines.
Some vines, as far as the eyes can see, and woodlands and everything. Yeah, it really is a beautiful office, I have to say. The fruit, we only use fruit that we've grown ourselves to craft our Gusbourne wines. We have 60 hectares of vines planted here in Kent, and the Blanc de Blanc, or the fruit that goes into the Blanc de Blanc, isn't decided until the winemaking team taste and grade each of the wines from every harvest.
So we're harvesting at the moment, so you're not quite sure what you may produce and what you may not produce. Is that right?
Yeah, there is a degree of uncertainty. We know full well that we'll make a Blanc de Blanc unless we have an absolute disaster. But we don't know quite how many bottles we'll make, nor do we know where the fruit will come from for the Blanc de Blanc. So naturally it's Chardonnay, so we know that there are certain blocks which won't be suitable, Pinot Noir and Pinot Meunier in particular, and we'll also know certain blocks within different vineyards here, which we know typically are our most expressive Chardonnay and or the right fruit profile for a Blanc de Blanc style wine. So there'll be some areas which you can pretty much be certain that block in Commander's Vineyard, just through the trees there, for example, I'm pretty sure there'll be a high proportion of fruit there that goes into the blend. But the Blanc de Blanc is the creation of around about 20 to 30 different component parts. So what we mean by that is different blocks of fruit that are fermented individually, and then blended together to create a kind of a Gusbourne expression of Blanc de Blanc in any given vintage.
And are those blocks designed by your winemaker? Is that to them? Or it's not just we'll copy it up from champagne somewhere and that's what we'll do.
No, so I mean there's various elements of Gusbourne which are kind of crafted on tradition, if you like. So traditional ways of farming vineyards, traditional grape varieties that are planted, for example, and many other aspects of it, which we use history to sort of guide us and say, well, there are certain ways of making high-class sparkling wine, and they have been in Champagne for many years, and we ought to follow those. But then we like to challenge convention, be ourselves, be a little bit different, and show some craft, which maybe we'll come on to a bit later on. But ultimately, the winemaking team will taste all of the wines blind. So that doesn't mean that they sit there with blindfolds on, but what it means is they'll taste various different samples of Chardonnay throughout the course of the blending process, or the grading process, which precedes blending early next year with the fruit which is just going into the press at the moment. And they determine which of the fruit is the most expressive, like I say, and suitable for each of the blends. And certain blocks tend to always be appropriate, and certain other ones are different year on year. But what we're looking to do is create a consistent Gusbourne style, whilst also expressing the differences in vintage, because we're a vintage only producer. So there's a requirement to keep something which people think, well, I love Gusbourne Blanc de Blanc. We don't want people to have a completely different experience from one vintage to another, but we want there to be a degree of individuality in each of the wines that expresses that vintage and the different seasons, the different
which obviously, 2019 was a good summer. Last year wasn't so good, was it? So
absolutely, yes, and that's the real, I suppose, the commercial challenge, as you were alluding to a moment ago, in that some vintages will make a decent quality sort of quantity of wines, and vintages such as 2024 will suffer and have a real challenge in terms of trying to make wine. And we actually didn't make very many bottles at all from that vintage. Things tend to balance themselves out over time, and we like to think that we're guided by nature in many ways, and we take fruit when it's available, and we don't overstress plants when it's not, and try and work with nature to keep the kind of the Gusbourne wine kind of story evolving.
I love that. I think that's, again, from a Grapes and Greens perspective, there's so many similarities from the golf and a wine. You're open to the elements. This year it's been very difficult for a lot of golf courses because it's been so hot so early, and so dry, and not enough water. So you find that causes different challenges. And similarly to different weather patterns at certain times of year, it causes differences in wine growing. Yeah,
absolutely. And I won't name the golf course, but we had an unfortunate experience with a golf course that was suffering really with the dry weather, and their greens were in a terrible state, which I'm sure was really out of their control. But I can see that lots of golf courses would have had a real difficulty, in particular in that kind of early part of summer where it just seemed to be dry and sunny for such a prolonged period.
Well, the other thing is that the ground temperature, it doesn't get warm because it drops at night, so it doesn't have that consistency for the grass to grow. It's still struggling. It wants to keep under there until it gets nice and warm all the way through. So it's very difficult for course managers to manage that. And the ones that do, very clever. And it's they've obviously got a lot of equipment, which I'm sure we'll go into what kind of equipment you have as well. But
I suppose the difference is with the vineyards where rainfall is kind of healthy in certain times of the year, but ultimately the vine rootstocks are going so far below the surface that they're accessing the water table within sort of the deep elements of the soil. So we don't really require that level of continual rain or sort of spraying water kind of access that a golf course will obviously all year round through the summer. So actually this summer that we've just had in the UK, and that kind of prolonged dryness, sunshine, warmth, brightness, the amount of times you sort of wake up and see a clear blue sky was kind of wonderful, wasn't it? And actually the vines are thriving in that environment because they're accessing the water that's kind of available through the root system. So yes, we're not quite at the stage in this country of requiring irrigation like they do in certain very, very warm parts of the world.
I did see a vineyard, and I don't know if you do it here, but they have irrigation in order to protect it from frost. So they pump over water so that will freeze and protect the vines.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, I was like, wow.
That's interesting. Yeah, I mean, I think many different people try and combat frost in kind of many different ways. We have frost fans, which kind of come on when there's a requirement. But thankfully, the way that our vineyards have been planted here in Kent, we don't have many instances of significant challenge. I'll touch wood as I say that, because you never know from one year to the next. But we have the provision for, and they do come on occasion in certain pockets, but not that regularly. Although maybe ask our head of vineyards, or maybe he'll have a different story about a week or so where they come on every night and he has to come out with his team to check that everything's working as they should. So he probably will answer that question slightly differently than I do.
So we usually ask our guests, it's slightly different from you, but I was thinking it would be a good one to have, was like, what is your favourite wine story? You know, you worked for Berry Brothers before you worked for Gusbourne, but after you worked for Golf Break. So you must, obviously a fantastic company to work for and some very interesting wines.
Yeah, absolutely. Really fortunate to have had a fantastic career to date in terms of working for brands and within sort of industries which I have a real interest and passion for, which I think probably sort of explains some of the longevity. I mean, I was at Berry Brothers for I think around 8 years, and coming up on my 7-year anniversary, I think it is, here at Gusbourne. So that's maybe testament to interest from my perspective as well in the roles that I've undertaken. At Berry Brothers, I was fortunate to work with some incredible people within the wine trade, some wonderful masters of wine, some just wonderful characters within sort of fine wine team, sort of internationally renowned commercial people maybe from that kind of buying and selling of wines. But with the UK being the heart of the international wine trade for many years, simply because we were unbiased, we weren't making any high quality wines of our own. We could have that independent judgment, and therefore UK based kind of wine trade individuals develop that international reputation for being sound judges and appreciators of the best wines around the world. I rode on their coattails, essentially carried some bags and enjoyed walking down the red carpet with some of these wonderful people on numerous trips to Bordeaux to taste the latest vintage en primeur, which was always absolutely stunning and great fun and really eye-opening to a kind of young, perhaps a little bit naive entrance into the trade. I have a marketing background, so I was there to scribe, as they called it, write the blogs, write up the tasting notes, and sort of make sure that we documented everything that we were doing, as we were sort of in the early days of blogs and podcasts and all sorts of things. I went for lunch one day at a fantastic chateau, and I think it's where I kind of really sort of started to appreciate the idea of relationships and networks, the convivial nature of wine. That we were served some wonderful wines during the lunch, and all of the wines are served, and there's a bit of a fun and game session to determine which vintage the wines are and if they're from the estate we're being hosted by or elsewhere. And all these wonderful people from the wine trade could sort of pick these nuances out from vintage to vintage, whether we were left bank, right bank, all the various different aspects to it. But anyway, it boiled down to the fact that they served me and another colleague of mine who was more experienced, but on one of his first trips, the vintage of our birth over lunch, which was unbelievable. Cool. So it was sort of late 2000. Did
you know it was that? No. So you said, and you had to kind of say, well, I think it might be this, or and then they told you what kind of wine was it? Was it red, white?
So it's red Bordeaux,
okay.
Grand Cru Classé.
Oh, nice.
So it was 1981 vintage, so everyone can work out my age. It served in the late 2000s, so really long bottle age. And I suppose it describes my naivety at the time, as I was sat there as everyone was sort of working through. I think one or two of the team had been told that these wines were going to be served, so they were sort of almost trying to force me and my colleague to determine what it was and see if we could pick up the scent, which we didn't. So it was quite funny when they revealed it was 81. I was like, oh, well, that's my birth year. I was like, oh, is it?
Funny that.
So it was
saying earlier, that's very kind of traditional from an Asian perspective. You know, dates, birthdays, anniversaries are very important, aren't they?
Yes.
So
Absolutely.
It's a great talking point as well, isn't it? It's fantastic, and that's what I love about wine. You know, as you quite rightly say, and again, Grapes and Greens, it's about networking. It's about chatting after a round of golf. But if you have a glass of wine with it as well, you're probably going to have a lot more to chat about too. It's quite
absolutely, yeah, and it's nice to enjoy wine refreshing after a round of golf, I guess. Isn't it? Yes.
Definitely. So, what came first, your love of wine or your love of golf? Would you say?
Certainly golf.
Yeah.
To be honest, sport in general has always been real passion for me, and just real kind of interested in playing all sorts of sports when I was younger in particular. I used to play golf periodically, but it wasn't one of the more regular sports that I engaged with, which has probably explained some of my kind of swing at this stage of my development. But it's one of those games which I probably always envisaged that I would enjoy forever, as opposed to maybe some of the sports more kind of higher impact like football and so on. And actually the development of interest in that started in those sort of early 20s. So golf was certainly the first passion for sure.
And that because you came out of university, and I think you worked for a cruise liner.
Yes.
Yeah. But then the opportunity to go into golf breaks, when it was really pretty much at the start, wasn't it? Was it with Andrew? Obviously, we've hosted Andrew. I think he's still our leading person on the podcast. So there you go. There's a challenge for you.
Yeah, quite right.
And he started from his bedroom basically. And when did you start at golf breaks, and how did you get into that?
I think it must have been around about 2006.
Okay, right.
And yes, so I came out of university with a real interest in marketing, and knew that was sort of the vocation that was right for me. I was sort of really interested in that kind of sort of data-driven activity, kind of loved the creative aspects of it, and that kind of ability to speak to people and sort of build relationships and sort of actually see things happen. So conduct some marketing activity and see if it drove some commercial activity and response. So I knew that that's where I wanted to go, and working for a cruise liner in Southampton was interesting, because 25 years or so ago, is it that long? Not quite, 20 odd years ago, cruising wasn't quite such the kind of positive story that it is today, and maybe less accessible to a younger audience. So it was a great marketing grounding, but not really an interest. So when I saw the marketing opportunity at golf breaks, I jumped at the opportunity, given, I suppose, that interest in sport and golf. And you're right, I'm not quite sure how long golf breaks have been in existence from then, but a few years, I think there was already real momentum. And Andrew, with his kind of other sort of fellow directors, Steve, Daniel, and Guy, were all in place, and forging a great culture and a wonderful place to work for a couple of years.
Yeah, definitely. And still booming. I mean, absolutely.
Yeah, and I listened to the podcast, and actually I think that's it. We sort of connected via LinkedIn after that, and it was great to hear how successful they've gone on to become, and clearly with the competitive nature of Andrew and the team, I'm sure they'll be gunning for future success as well.
So, someone was telling me when I was at Pitch in Manchester last week that really the biggest sector for travel at the moment is golf. It's
really?
Absolutely booming. Everybody who's got, and there's a lot of new people come into golf who want to go and find out outside of the UK. If they've played, we've travelled inside the UK, that's been quite good, but where can we go next? And I think that's the beauty of golf and wine, is that you can travel extensively all over the world, which is amazing.
It is, isn't it? And I suppose the obvious thing to say about golf is the handicap system that lets you play with players of all abilities and have a fun kind of competitive match. But equally, you can generally play within reason, of course. The majority of the golf courses that you see on television, you can go and play, and okay, some of them might cost you a fair amount, and you might require a member to sort of sign you in. But aside from those handful of courses that are inaccessible, there are opportunities to play all these wonderful courses, and that's where I think really sort of drives the aspiration for golfers or hackers like myself that kind of want to get out there and get to St Andrews or wherever it might be.
Exactly. And it again, like wine a little bit, and where it's changed, I think, is that there always, I think, again, since the pandemic, boundaries have come down a little bit. It used to be slightly snobbish, a little bit for old men. Now it's got a much younger vibe, which I think is great. And I think that's also with wine, isn't it? I think there isn't so much snobbery. I mean, as I said, probably when I got into wine, sort of 82, 83, you needed the right school tie to get anywhere, really. and now I don't feel that that's the case. I mean, kind of looking at your staff today, they're from lots of different backgrounds, all really, really enjoying what they're doing and passionate about what they're producing, which is great.
Yeah, I think so. I think you're right. And it's almost, perhaps it goes with the demographics of individuals enjoying the wines is changing as well, in the way that those sort of serving working within the industry do. And actually a burgeoning industry like English wines kind of production is kind of maybe crafting, creating more opportunity for ways in for people. We kind of spoke a few weeks ago about the way that most people entered the wine trade in history was working through a significant retailer like Majestic, maybe Victoria Wine or Oddbins in the past, where they would support the graduate trainee scheme, or even just trainees working in the stores with their WSET qualifications and everything else. And that's where people started, saw an opportunity elsewhere, and sort of navigated into various different roles and different businesses within the trade. And maybe English wine offers a very different opportunity with the requirement for people to work in vineyards, in the winery, cellar doors like our nest here in Kent, as well as marketing, finance, and all the other different functions required to run a business.
Bringing in hospitality, which brings in, again, from community, it's bringing in more jobs to the community as well, which is important. Certainly, when you're looking at more land and the use of land and how it's produced, and the money hopefully will then go back into the community as well. So it's really important sort of cycle.
It is, and it's the one thing, we won't get into the boring nature of kind of government lobbying and so on. But the one thing which I always kind of sort of strives the opportunity. We had a meeting with some senior directors here at Gusbourne recently, just talking about the scale of the opportunity that we have as an English wine collective, and of course for Gusbourne in terms of our position in the market, the kind of the amount of wine that's consumed around the world, the amount of champagne in particular. Just to give a stat, there's around about 300 million bottles of champagne produced on average every year. The highest number of bottles produced from England and Wales was 21 million bottles in 2023. So there's a massive difference and opportunity for us, given the nature of the traditional method sparkling wines we're making, which are commensurate in quality at different levels within the positioning sort of framework of champagne. For English wine sort of competition, sort of to keep nipping at their heels and kind of drive commercial opportunity and therefore provide more for communities in terms of different job roles and everything else. But we have the third highest duty rate in the UK.
So if you're listening, government,
and we charge the same duty on English wines as we do wines which we import, whereas in other nations like France, one of the biggest wine producers in the world, they have a lower duty rate for their own wines. So it's little wonder that they have a more nationalist approach to the wines that they're consuming in terms of value as well as quality, of course. And obviously we're not naive enough to not forget the fact that not only did we still enjoy, and for many years selling wines from around the world has been the bedrock of the UK wine scene. It's not going to change overnight, but there is an opportunity, and with some more government support, we think we could really make some inroads into that.
Oh, fascinating. It kind of comes on nicely to the fact that you joined Gusbourne as marketing director, which you thoroughly enjoyed and wherever, and then the opportunity came up, the position of CEO came up. This took us through that process, because again, a lot of our listeners are sort of looking at from a golf perspective or an industry perspective of how their careers can develop. How did you make that jump, and how did that come about?
It's interesting, isn't it? My predecessor, Charlie Holland, was our chief winemaker as well as chief executive officer for a long time. He was chief winemaker first, and then took over the sort of the CEO role as well. And we always used to position ourselves quite rightly as kind of led by winemaking. So it was very much led by the wine, which actually in the formative stages of Gusbourne was incredibly important, because ultimately the success that the business has today, has had and will have in the future, is based on the fact that the wines are absolutely delicious.
At the end of the day, it might look great, but if it doesn't taste great, you're not going to buy it, are you?
Exactly, and we were talking about sort of staff and teams a little moment ago, and actually the inspiration, the aspiration that comes from the staff, what motivates and enthuses them, is the fact that the wines are fantastic. We're not asking people to bend the truth in marketing. Everything's authentic. And actually, my job, I always used to stand and do presentations internally as the marketing director. So my job's easy, to make the wines look fantastic and tell the stories, because the wine always backs that up. So if we didn't have the products, all the other stuff could be done, but it wouldn't be believed and it wouldn't be as sort of ingrained in everybody. So I think that inspiration and aspiration comes from how good the wine is, and also, I suppose, the opportunity which is out there. I suppose I've always had an aspiration at some stage in my career that I'd like to sort of move into sort of a more senior management position. And I think, fortunately for myself, and I think this is maybe the story of most of my career so far, is that opportunities arise, and I've been fortunate enough to be in the right place at the right time, which I'm sure comes as well from sort of doing the right things and having some success in terms of roles. Perhaps, but certainly a little bit of right place, right time, and an opportunity to succeed somebody who's done a fantastic job to get us to where we are, and couldn't be more grateful for Charlie for all of the work that he's done on behalf of Gusbourne for sort of around 10 years or so. I think he was with us for.
Amazing. And again, when we played a couple of weeks ago, you're kind of saying that you took the role And I know, when I was chief executive at Lot Lomond, we went through some pretty hard times and some challenging times. And one of the things that you've been delisted from the stock exchange. Was that quite stressful in your kind of first year, wasn't it, as well?
It was around about the year's anniversary of me taking over. Actually, it was when we had to start that process. Yes. So yeah, that was a challenging time certainly for myself and our CFO, Kathy, who were sort of between the two of us did the lion's share of the kind of the work there, and the uncertainty for the rest of the team really. And I think the sort of the biggest challenge, or the kind of what hits you in the face sort of when you take over into a senior role of CEO or managing director, or other C-suite roles within a larger organisation than Gusbourne, is that sort of sense of responsibility. And it's responsibility for the people that are working within the team. So you want to provide a fantastic working environment, but also a future sustainable enterprise for them to work in. But of course, shareholders in our case, we were a PLC, as you say, so we do have hundreds of shareholders that range from significant holdings to maybe less significant, but for those individuals,
it could be sustainable.
It's probably very significant. Yeah, so everyone's an important shareholder. So shareholders, all the stakeholders within the business, and then I guess the wine community. I've sort of taken over for Gusbourne, and we are one of the leading wine producers, and we all have our, I guess, other leading English wine producers have their different ways of describing themselves, and as to why maybe they say that they're the leading producer. We're certainly not in terms of volume or brand presence, but we think we are in terms of quality, or certainly one of the top handful in that regard.
Very good, excellent. It kind of, again, overarch, because from a wine and earth perspective, sustainability is a big thing. I've visited a number of vineyards. And one of the things that we pride ourselves on is having biodynamic wines, organic wines, or certainly working towards that. How are you implemented, and how are you looking at the sustainability? We kind of touched on it right at the beginning, but it is a massive thing. From looking at the beautiful countryside, you can't sort of just go and desecrate it, can you? So you've got to do the right thing, haven't you?
Absolutely, yeah. And obviously the sustainability has become such a important topic for everyone, for consumers, for commentators, and for anyone that kind of runs any enterprise, that is bear in mind that what impact we're having on the environment and kind of what we're going to do for the future here. So we've always been mindful at Gusbourne. Very easy for us to say, but sustainability has always been a really important part of the brand's DNA, if you like, and how we operate. Both from that kind of more boring commercial sustainability perspective and developing a business which is fit for the long term, but equally the way that the strategy of the business has been created to self-serve itself in that regard, and really in particular in terms of production. So we are vintage only, so we craft wines from any given year. The wine that we're enjoying, as we mentioned, is 2019, and we'll see that the other one we have here is 2019 for rosé. So every bottle carries a year.
Yeah.
Vintaged.
Yeah.
So every year we require our vineyards to produce fantastic fruit, so that we can make a vintage product. So far, touch wood again, we've managed to do that in every year of our existence. If we were to perhaps be farming in a slightly different way, if we had a slightly different model, we maybe would have less kind of obligation, desire to farm the vineyards in such a sustainable way, because we need them to be fit and healthy every year. We want them to be. We kind of have maybe view our role as custodians of the estate in many ways, working with nature to ensure that the plants are fit and healthy to deliver us fruit every year. In some years, like 2023, they'll be delivering quite a lot more fruit than others, maybe like 2024. But we kind of work with the sort of the natural environment to take the right amount of fruit every year. We always want the fruit, the vines, to be fit and healthy and delivering really high quality fruit. For us, it's not about yield. Our shareholders might kind of ask a question about that. Yield's important from a commercial perspective, and we obviously need to make and sell enough bottles to make the business financially viable. But what we're really pursuing here, and first and foremost, is to make the best possible product, because we think that in the
most possible way as well.
Yeah, so, absolutely, and we think that will then drive that commercial success in the future as well.
I think certainly from again, we're talking to a lot of golfers. The younger elements, probably say under 40s, sustainability in the golf course is quite important to them. I'm sure even more so that it is for what they're drinking as well. So,
yeah, I can believe that for sure. And we have more and more questions about sustainability from visitors who come, be it trade visits from our restaurant and hotel partners that come to learn more about us, like we have a group here today. Equally, our public visitors that come to see us to taste wines and hear our story, maybe have lunch, and they want to know what we're doing on a sustainability perspective. So, like I say, we have this sort of obligation because of our role with nature here. There's a bit of a misconception that everyone thinks that just because we've got 60 hectares of vines planted and however many other acres of woodland and other kind of land as part of the estate, it's agricultural, therefore it must be positive for the environment. Lots of it is and some of it isn't. So we have to make sure that we monitor and keep on top of all the things which are detrimental to make sure we have a kind of a suitable carbon footprint, if you like. And we're working on those sorts of aspects to make sure that we calculate properly and report on that in the future. For now, we have a sustainability report for those who are particularly interested in the subject, and what kind of guides us in terms of the work that we look to do each and every year. And we're a founder member of the Sustainable Wines of Great Britain programme, which is, I suppose, the first stepping stone in sort of exploring this area properly and making sure we have a positive impact on the site and whatever it might be in the future. I think that's this kind of role of custodians. Our head of vineyards, John Pollard, has been with the business since day one. So sort of he has various nicknames, some of which is kind of employee number one, which he absolutely hates. But the other thing that he absolutely hates is when we call him the custodian of the vineyards. But he really is, because he's played a hand in planting them all, and he with his team looks after them. And that's what's so important here, is sort of having that kind of personal connection with the plants and ensuring that future viability of the site. 25 years ago, this was agricultural land used for very different things, and who knows what it will be in 150 years' time. So we need to leave the site as we found it, or maybe in slightly better condition if we can.
Yeah. And kind of even, I think everybody thinks of climate change and the stories of, well, now your sparkling wine is going to be so much better in England because of the climate change. Is that true, or is that a myth? Do you think that it's going to get better, or does it certainly help that it's getting warmer for you to produce, certainly sparkling wines anyway?
Yeah, I think there's quite a lot to answer in this question. I think without climate change, we don't think it will be possible to create the ripeness in the fruit, growing on the vines, in the grapes, to create a world-class product like we do from English producers. Across the board, there are lots of very, very good wines being created in England now, and long may that continue. But climate change in itself is, of course, a very negative kind of subject, and having a kind of a detrimental impact on the world. So we're very far away from celebrating climate change, but we are taking advantage of the opportunity that it creates with a warmer climate, a drier climate, on the whole, and more importantly, more sunshine hours. More clear blue sky. We have a very similar terroir. So what terroir, kind of French term for kind of climate as well as soil, and kind of the ground, the earth, everything that surrounds the kind of the natural environment. So we have a very similar temperature and climate to what Champagne enjoyed in the 1970s. And 1970s and onwards, some of the champagnes have been absolutely fantastic, both vintage and non-vintage. So that's maybe where the roadmap goes for us in terms of the opportunity from a quality perspective. And kind of you use the term best, and I don't mean to pick you up on a particular phrase that you use, or better than other wines from around the world. We think that actually the wines are definitely commensurate from a quality perspective, but English sparkling wine, traditional method, made from the same grape varieties, the same production processes, fermented, aged in bottle on lees, disgorged, etc., in exactly the same processes as champagne, taste different. And that's something we should celebrate. The wines are different. There is an opportunity and a place for both of them on a restaurant wine list. There are certain occasions where you might prefer the richer style and softer style of a champagne than you will a maybe more vibrant style of an English sparkling wine, and that's okay. We don't seek to completely eradicate champagne. We just seek to promote the fact that we're making something that we think can be better on occasion, but certainly is there level with many of the great champagnes from a quality perspective, at least.
Yeah, and I think there's a place for everything, and they have great stories as well. I think the nice thing about English wine, and someone like yourselves here at Gusbourne, is it's relatively new. So like in 2000, it's only 20 years. So the beauty of it, seeing it get better, but also starting from a tasting it today, a pretty good start, you know. It's
Absolutely.
not bad.
And what's really fascinating with our members, we'll open some of the older vintages and provide them access to the library for sort of certain opportunities to purchase wines. And I mentioned the kind of the birth year story, where there's a particular year that someone might absolutely love to have a bottle of Gusbourne for, to mark a moment. We'll open the opportunity for our members to purchase a vintage from the earlier years, if you like, and sometimes we taste them with the winemaking team, and if they're feeling generous and I'm on side, they'll invite me to join them for that, just to understand how the wines are evolving, and to understand how long, what the ageability is, what the profiles are of these wines. And we tasted some 2008s recently, and they were absolutely delicious, still vibrant in the glass, rich mousse, flavoursome, and after sort of half an hour in the glass, the flavour starts to dissipate, as you might expect from a wine of that age. But I think what's exciting about that is that it was the third year of production at Gusbourne. So the vineyards were first planted in 2004, but it takes a couple of years for the vines to start producing fruit which is significantly ripe and abundant enough from a yield perspective to actually produce some wine. The yields are low in those first couple of years until things pick up. So the third vintage we opened and was absolutely fantastic. Right. So we've learned an incredible amount in those kind of intervening years. The vineyards are more mature, the climate's improving, inverted commas, from a wine production perspective. So arguably the wines we're making today are better and will have longer ageability because of the practices and the information that we've been able to impart on them.
Do you have a favourite vintage?
Favourite vintage is quite hard to answer. My favourite wine is, we produced the first vintage of our Gusbourne Blanc de Noir was 2016. And that was my favourite wine that we've produced in my time at Gusbourne, at least, and released for sale. And I love the kind of the richness of a sparkling Pinot Noir. But it's hard to look past the Blanc de Blanc, the wine we're tasting. And I take myself back to one of my first days at Gusbourne. I stood on the decking in Boot Hill Vineyard just behind you, with Charlie, our head winemaker and CEO at the time. And he was sort of talking to me about Gusbourne and sort of trying to indoctrinate me, if you like, in terms of the stories and how we were going to sort of take things forward. And he sort of poured me a glass of Blanc de Blanc. It was the 2013 vintage at the time. So I said, shut your eyes. And where we were sort of stood in the vineyard, it's quite breezy. So, and we're sort of overlooking the Romney Marsh, which is a flat land out towards the sea. And he sort of said, what can you sort of taste, or sort of, what can you smell? I was like, kind of this like salty character. And he's like, yeah, that's the kind of the environment. We're not quite sure what minerality is. Everyone in wine terms uses the phrase. No one really understands what they mean by it, nor can anyone pinpoint exactly what drives it in a wine. But I tend to think it's that sort of feeling of saltiness, of kind of cleanliness, kind of almost like stone-like kind of purity. And that kind of was like, wow. And that was just me tasting the air, smelling the air. Can't taste the air, of course. But and then tasting the wine, and it's like, wow, okay. So the Blanc de Blanc has a special place in, I think, all of our hearts at Gusbourne, and it tends to be the wine that we're most known for because of that distinctive taste.
But you do make still wines, obviously, and do you see that growing in the future? Is that something that, because generally, I'm talking not as an expert, but generally people look at English wines as sparkling, certainly the better ones. But I have tasted some really nice still wines, and I haven't tasted your Pinot Noir, but I'm looking forward to trying that certainly at some point. And do you think that's a growing market for you? And do you think people will look beyond, it's a sparkling, that there is something, again, from a climate change or from a production possibility, that's where you can see growth?
Yeah, absolutely. And what's really fascinating is the latest Wine GB trade stats from 2024 suggest that in 2024, 6 million bottles of sparkling wine were sold, of English and Welsh wine. It's an English and Welsh body. And 3 million bottles of still wine. So actually, the prevalence of the commercial opportunity is already growing. You're right, the climate, the kind of the opportunity to ripen the fruit to a requisite level is here, and the interest is. And actually, what's really sort of fascinating about it is that there aren't many wine producers around the world that are, or kind of wine regions even, that are recognised for producing high-class, really smart quality still wine and sparkling. You think of sparkling, you think immediately of champagne.
Yeah.
You think of still wine. If you're a Burgundy lover, you think of Burgundy or Bordeaux or Rioja or the Rhone Valley. And there aren't any sparkling wines of real note that I can think of from those regions. There are a handful of great producers around the world that are genuinely kind of farming both still and sparkling. Others might have been brought together through mergers and conglomerates or whatever it might be. But it's a really fascinating piece that we're making a small proportion of still wines to go alongside the sparkling in this country, which is, like I say, another way that we're all kind of challenging convention in some respects by doing something different.
Is that exciting for you as well, though? It's something new, isn't it?
It is.
And trying to sell that, and from a marketeer's point of view as well, is how do we sell that? How do we get that out and tell people?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's just it's another exciting aspect that, wow, okay, we can actually create fantastic still wines in this country now, and many people are already. And so that story continues. And as much as I'd love to say that everyone should drink sparkling wine throughout the course of their meal or whatever it might be, and it does work, but some people just require a glass of still wine at some point, and actually to have the wines to be from England as well, as opposed to always needing to scour the world for a good Pinot Noir or Chardonnay or the other kind of grape varieties that are grown. It's a really exciting opportunity for everyone. For us, it's still a kind of small part of our story. So still wine we produce around about 5 or 6% of our annual harvest is used to create still at the moment. That's just because of our belief in only making the best possible still wines to match that kind of level with the sparkling. Yeah. And all the vineyards were planted with sparkling in mind. I'd have to ask John to get a definitive answer, but I'm almost certain that none of the vines were planted with a vision of making still wine today.
Okay, all right.
So actually everything's geared towards sparkling. There's certain vines we think providing suitable fruit to craft those still wines. Which
but they're Burgundian vines,
So we've had we're interested in Kent, and this is where Gusbourne maybe differs to some of the other English wine story, which is sort of focused on chalk, and in particular the Downs, Sussex, and maybe northern Kent. Chalk soil, which is very typical of Champagne. So planting Chardonnay, Pinot Noir in there to create Champagne lookalikes, if you like, in terms of those early days. We're planting predominantly here in Kent on clay, which is very similar to Burgundy. So we have the same varieties that they grow in Burgundy, which are the same as they use for Champagne. Typically, the Champagne variety of Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. So our estate is planted around about 50% with Burgundian clone fruit and Champagne clone fruit. So although there are lots of different ways that the vines need to be farmed throughout the season for making still wine or sparkling, we're able to have some access to it because we think those Burgundian clone vines are producing the requisite level of fruit flavour to create a still wine. And
one of the other things, it's a bit like golf, is that you need to start with a lot of money. Yes. It's not cheap to make wine, is it? And commercially, no. and to grow that market, it takes people, it takes land, it takes a lot of things in order to get that bottle on the table, doesn't it? It really does, and that's what I've in my very short time in the wine industry, the last sort of 40 months, is really understanding, when I talk to producers, the love that it really has to have. Because, yes, long term, I mean, this is probably, as you say, one of the largest and probably one of the most commercial from a quality perspective. But it's still not easy, is it? I mean, you've got a big backer, and you need that. Otherwise, it just wouldn't exist, would it?
No, it wouldn't. And I mean, we could have taken some shortcuts. We could have, not every producer only uses fruit that they've grown themselves. So there are ways and means of acting in a commercial-minded way to purchase fruit at different rates every year to kind of manage your inventory or manage your cost base and work with whatever the season is in terms of whether there's more fruit, less fruit, drives supply and demand on price, all the obvious things there. We could have the contract wine made elsewhere. So of course there's charges for all these things, but it might be a different way of doing it where at different scales it might be more cost efficient to do things in a slightly different way, utilising those agency services to sort of produce certain things. It could be that we don't have a direct sales team to distribute the wines, and it could be that we didn't kind of keep control of all of the process through bottling, disgorging, labelling and dispatch. But we, as a brand position, want full control. because we're operating in a super premium sector of the market, and we want to make sure that every touch point that the consumer has with Gusbourne is correct, commensurate with what we want that customer to feel, to enjoy at any given time. And we need control of that. We need control of the narrative, the story, the supply chain. If something goes wrong, we need to know about it so we can rectify it. We don't want to find out 2 weeks later that one of our best customers couldn't receive our wine for 2 weeks for whatever reason it might be. We want to know on the day so we can either rectify it or find a way of appeasing the situation. So that control is important, and that costs money.
Because that's sometimes what's labelled as the English market, is that the wines are expensive. But I think also golf is now, it has been seen to be expensive. And actually, the podcast we did at Turnberry was asking about the £1,000 tee time. But it comes back very similar to yours, but it's about quality. It's about investing in producing what is quality in order to provide people with those amazing experiences. If that, playing the outer course on a beautiful summer, or drinking wine on a beautiful autumnal day at Gusbourne, it takes money, and therefore it's worth it. It always comes down to value for money rather than how much it costs. And I think sitting here with a glass of Gusbourne Blanc de Blanc 2019, good value for money.
We think so, and thankfully we still have work to do, but we're kind of improving the financial side of the business as well. A lot of the heavy lifting's been done at Gusbourne now. We have the vineyards planted, we have the winery behind us, we have the fruit going in to create yet another harvest. We have all the presses and the bottling line and all the boring stuff which costs money, the equipment.
The foundations.
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
The foundations, the stuff that people don't see. It's a bit like, I've seen now golf courses investing in amazing course superintendents, yard to look after the equipment. And nobody sees that. They just want to see the golf course as good as possible. But what takes that is I've got to look after my equipment. I've got to buy the equipment.
Yeah, exactly. And I think you're right. It's thinking about it from the golf context of some of the fantastic places I may have been fortunate to have played. It's that experience again, isn't it? When you arrive at the golf club, how you're greeted, the bag drops, tiny thing like that, someone polishing your clubs and being really embarrassed that someone's actually done that for you when you haven't cared to do it for yourself. But that's the touch of service, which of course you're going to pay a premium for. But isn't that lovely when you kind of see them on the golf cart and off you go to the first tee, and there's provision of little things for your kind of golf sets, little mementos for your day, things that you actually need because you've forgotten that you ran out of tees last week. And then you get to the tee box and it's absolutely pristine. And that's, I think, where you realise, okay, it might have cost a little bit of money to do this, but wow, what a day we're having, and it's only going to get better. And okay, actually it makes up sometimes, I think, for the shots which aren't so good. You kind of, because when you hit that inevitable one, or maybe more depending on how well you're playing, that are the knockout shots on a great golf course, that's when you really have that moment of satisfaction and I think sort of fulfillment, if you like, of pleasure, enjoyment.
I was really looking forward to coming down today, and because I'd seen obviously the website and wherever, and just going in and seeing the room, seeing it was kind of excitement, but it's really nicely done. Obviously we're going to produce a video to show, to go with the podcast, so that helps to really show you and back up the investment, but also the hospitality side that gives you that value for money as well. And it's an experience. It's drinking Gusbourne is like playing Lot Lomond. It's about experience, isn't it? That's the thing.
It really is, and kind of almost there's a bit of an analogy here of the kind of the link with golf clubs and English wine producers in some respects. We've created a hospitality environment here, and kind of been saying recently, almost by accident, the wine has always been the focus. So when we first opened the cellar door of the Nest in sort of late 2017, we only had 3 wines available for guests to come and enjoy. There was no food provision. The team did a wonderful job of taking guests on sort of short tours of the vineyard, tasted the wines, and people went away having had a lovely experience on the whole. And that's then developed over time, and we've actually realised there's opportunity to engage more with visitors that want to stay for longer, and in particular on a day like today where it's beautiful, and there aren't many better places to be in the world than in a lovely sort of rural environment, looking at the lovely colours of the plants and the vines and a clear blue sky in the distance, tasting some lovely wine and eating some lovely food that accompanies, and you realise that sort of food, wine, travel, and kind of in my world, food, wine, golf travel. Is kind of the connection. And actually you think, yes, so provide better food, and enhance that offering, we now have a fantastic in-house chef who looks after our guests with provision of the food, which matches and brings out the best flavours in the wine. So he's doing a wonderful job with his team in the kitchen to ensure that all the dishes are designed seasonally to reflect whichever wines we have available to serve on the experiences and enhance the product. So the primary process product for us is the wine, in the way that the golf club will be the golf course, but all the auxiliary parts that come with it have to match up that to and work with it.
Because that's your brand at the end of the day, isn't it? You know, you can't have great wine and then, you know, no disrespect, that little cafe around the corner. You know?
Exactly. If the food provision was poor, people would go away from Gusbourne saying, well, wines were great, but the food was poor.
Yeah.
And the thing we're human, so we always think about the things which are negative before the things which are fantastic. I mean, how many times have we all left somewhere, had a wonderful time, and not been bothered to fill in the TripAdvisor review or whatever it might be, because we're all very busy people. But when you've had that one terrible time, you're more likely to have said something or written an email or whatever it might be. So even in that psyche, I think you kind of you have to be mindful that everything has to hit the mark of what you're trying to achieve, or guests will go away and think poorly of you. And unfortunately, even if it's not what you're really trying to do, which is create the best wine in the world, sell it.
The podcast in its first series kind of touched about 31 different countries.
Did it?
Where are you? Have you got more export, or do you see that being the biggest part of your growth coming forward, or do you think it's just still very much in the UK?
Yeah, look, I think one of the things which I've really fortunately inherited as CEO at Gusbourne is a business with a really strong route to market strategy and an identity and understanding of what we're trying to do, how we're taking the wines to market. From the early days, we were always focused on 3 core channels. So sort of direct to the UK trade, so that's sort of restaurants, bars, hotels, retailers, independent wine shops here in the UK, as then international, so export, as well as sort of direct to consumer, so cellar door, membership, website, primarily. So we're in 38 international markets now, which has grown quite substantially in the last sort of 3 or 4 years. And some of those markets are very early stages, taking a small amount of wine every year, but have the opportunity to build and grow, and are great places to be. And what our kind of aspiration is, and kind of always use this sort of the idea of something like the Four Seasons group, where you go to a Four Seasons hotel anywhere around the world, and you would probably expect to see a bottle of Krug and or Dom Perignon on a wine list. What we want is for Gusbourne to be that type of product, that you are seeing us in wherever you might be. You might be in Thailand, where we are, and have opened up a route to market recently, in a fantastic 5-star hotel, and you see the wine list and you see, Gusbourne are there. And you have that wonderful memory of, I was at Restaurant Story in London recently and we had a wonderful dinner there, or we were in, using the Four Seasons example, the Four Seasons in Park Lane, and enjoyed a bottle there. And that kind of operating in that true kind of global luxury environment. So that's where
golf clubs could be good for Gusbourne, because we've said a number of times on the podcast and discussed it, is where clubs are looking to improve their food and beverage offering, especially around Sunday lunches.
Yes.
And with better chefs, with better food comes better wine. And obviously, to start, a nice Sunday lunch off with a glass of Gusbourne would be great, wouldn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, really whets the appetite, I think. Every time I drink a glass of the Blanc de Blanc, I kind of feel quite really Moorish, kind of want something else, and it does kind of, and it drives that kind of that palate to want something to eat as well, I think too. So it's a great precursor to a Sunday roast. No, you're absolutely right with that kind of analogy of kind of golf clubs improving that kind of F&B offering. I mean, I know just from, I'm not a member of a club at the moment, but whenever I go to play, either as a guest of a friend who's a member somewhere, or we just go and play a green fee somewhere, the opportunity to stay afterwards. And the older I get, maybe the more sensible I get, the thing, well, actually, let's have a drink and let's have a bite to eat. 'Cause it's often with someone who I don't see every day or every week, or even that often. So actually, why not let's spend an extra hour and have something nice to eat and a good conversation and a catch up.
But also, like, people now looking at travel, and so they're traveling and they're staying in the hotel. So again, more time to enjoy a glass of wine as well. So it doesn't have to be a beer. I mean, let's have a couple of beers, but then right, let's have a nice glass of wine, because the afternoon is just going past. So,
yeah, no, you're right. And yeah, we're thrilled to be in 38 markets. We think we're in the majority of the markets we ought to be in. There are probably another 3 or 4 that we'd like to add to that roster, but we're not we haven't got a wall chart and we're saying that we want to be out in world domination, because there are certain markets which just aren't mature enough or don't have a strong enough wine scene that won't accept a brand and a product like ours yet. And that's okay. And it's about kind of working with those markets to drive more sort of depletions, build a sort of a stronger brand presence. But we're also doing that through some great work that the team are doing with global travel retail. So the wines are found on Cunard cruise ships, for example.
Right. And British Airways first class.
Absolutely, yeah. So any of your listeners who might have been flying anywhere with very expensive airfare recently might have enjoyed our super premium 51 degrees north in first class. And if you're about to fly until the end of September, it will be enjoyed on board there too, or offered as well. And then our Brut Rosé, the 2019 Rosé, is in Club World as well.
Okay.
So the business class cabin. So British Airways have been really supportive of the English wine community, actually over many years, and even more so now. We now have English wines all year round in Club World and in first class. And there are several producers, including us, that are on rotation. So they've kind of given an opportunity to a number of great producers to have their wine sown on board. So we're really appreciative as a community, but I think it just goes to show that the wines are a sort of suitable level that an important flag carrier is willing to sort of put all of its eggs in one basket in some respects. But the better analogy of all of its bottles in the right wine case is probably a better analogy, isn't it? But it doesn't really come off the tongue quite as well.
Well, Ash and I are looking forward to travelling around a wee bit more. So if we get first class, we know where to come.
Yeah, absolutely. Excellent.
We always finish off the podcast. It's more of a golf question, but as a golfer, you probably understand this.
Absolutely.
If you won the golfing lottery, what would you spend your money on? You know, you've got all the money in the world, but you can only spend it on golf. It could be on travel, it could be on golf club. What do you think it would be?
Yeah, okay. There's probably 2 things. And certainly this is where kind of the food, wine, I know you said golf, but wine, golf kind of comes together, and travel is really, I love food, love Michelin star dining. I'd go and eat in all the 3 Michelin star restaurants around the world. I think there's almost 150 or so.
Right, wow.
And play golf in the great golf courses that are linked to all of these wonderful regions. The 2 things which golf courses tend to be in beautiful locations. I mean, they have to be because you have to be outside. And then usually vineyards are too. So there's a connection between that. So my second thing, because once I've done that after a year, or maybe it'll take me a year and a half to do that, who knows, with all the money left in the bank, I'd have to create a kind of a link between wine and golf. And thinking of that fact that every time I go on a wine trip, go to a vineyard in this country, it's in a beautiful place. Golf courses are typically in beautiful places as well. Putting the 2 together and having that real connection between wine and golf would be a kind of a real dream.
Cool. I might be on that trip. I'll tell you. That would be pretty cool. That would be pretty cool. And then finally, you got 1 round of golf left. Round of golf. Where would it be? Who would it be with, and why?
I thought about this. I know you kind of have asked this question to all of your guests, I guess, on the podcast I've listened to. The place would be Old Head in Ireland. Never played it. Know it's accessible, so will one day. It's certainly on the list. From the minute I first joined Golf Breaks and was writing an email, I think, for the email subscriber database about golf holidays, trips to Ireland, I just remember looking at the pictures of Old Head and seeing it and thinking, wow, that's a place that I'd like to play. So that's kind of always been ever since that first moment. And I think for me, that was probably almost like the first moment when I thought, wow, there are some spectacular places to play. It's, I've played some lovely local golf courses up to that point. I thought, cracky, there's some real interest here. If I can get my game to a level to go and play a course like that, it would be tremendous. So that would be the location. And then the people's quite hard. I tend to play golf, my kind of golf community, if you like, is pockets of different people. So people that I went to university with who live down in Somerset, kind of wine trade colleagues who have an affinity with a game of golf and a glass of wine. So we'll play a couple of times a year. Sort of associates within sort of English wine, whatever it might be. And then kind of a group of friends that I grew up with at college and university. And I suppose, and sort of people in Farnham in Surrey where I've settled. So I'd probably want to bring everyone together for a kind of a Ryder Cup style golf weekend, which is what I do with my friends from home, and have that kind of last day sort of singles, and whoever the captain picks from the group of 20 or so people would be great fun to play with them on that wonderful course.
Fantastic. Jonathan, it's been fantastic talking with you, understanding a little bit more about English wine, certainly a lot more about Gusbourne. And we look forward to working with you throughout Series 2 and beyond.
Yeah,
cheers.
Me too. Cheers.
Thank you very much.